Quick note before the show, we did some digging in the past performances and we've uncovered a new angle. What we found is that if you like and subscribe to this channel, you're guaranteed to pick more winners. In all seriousness, we thank you for your support, both here on the YouTube channel. Also, you may be listening to this at the In the Money Media channel on iTunes as well. We've got a ton of video and audio content planned as we approach the Kentucky Derby. The best way to help, honestly, is just to subscribe to the channel. But we also have a contest I want to let you know about. This is taking place on the YouTube channel. You've got to pick the winners of the 3 prep races coming up this weekend for the Kentucky Derby, Wood, Bluegrass, Santa Anita Derby. The person who gets all 3 correct will either win, or if there's more than one of you, we'll do a little bit of a drawing. If 2 people win, we'll do a drawing amongst the people who pick the ones who yield the 2 best mutual prices. Anyway, that's all minutia. Really, all you got to do, pick the horse you think is going to win these 3 races. You'll win a $100 bet on the Kentucky Derby, and we'll reach out to you. So just drop that in the comment again on the YouTube page. Go to the YouTube page, In the Money Media. Give us who you think is going to win these 3 races and have your chance to win that $100 bet. You must be an In the Money newsletter subscriber, but that's real easy. That's free also. inthemoneypodcast.com/email. Check that out. Best way to keep up with all the content going on the In the Money Media Network. inthemoneypodcast.com/email. He's Nick Tammaro. I'm doing producer Craig's job. I'm catching you drinking. Oh, producer Craig's, look at him, Johnny on the spot. Pops the graphic right up there. Did I get you at a bad time, Nick?
No, you got me mid-coffee, but it's not my first coffee of the day, I will admit.
It's you need a lot of coffee this time of year. I mean, this is low-key one of the most exciting weekends of racing as far as I'm concerned, because you've got these big cards. And you've also got the opportunity to bet Australia late into the night. There's a whole lot going on over here. One thing we do not have is Sam Houston, though, not for a minute, for the thoroughbreds. How are the last couple days of the thoroughbred portion of the meet for you?
Good. We've got really good racing tonight and tomorrow. And I was going to say, of course, the coffee is necessary because I have a night job too. So it ends up we end up getting to the wee hours very quickly.
So I'm sorry, I screwed that up. I thought you had finished. You have two more of the thoroughbred meet?
2 more cards. Yeah, we Blake and I covered the carryover yesterday that got one winning ticket in the Space City Pick 6 for 30 grand.
Wow.
And there was a 50-1 winner of the 8th race that was only 15-1 on the morning line. So I tried to warn everybody, but yeah, but no, it's we've got some really good racing. So I mean, by all means, especially because that Santa Anita card tomorrow, the back end of which is pretty solid, goes until I want to say 7 o'clock or so Central Time, 8 o'clock Eastern, maybe even beyond that. So latch on for a little Sam Houston. We're starting at 5:45 Central Time tomorrow, and we've got 11 races on tap. Some really big fields at the back end of it. We've got a super fun 1.5-mile turf race that goes as the 9th. So should be good. I'll have to hit probably the inhaler by then to make sure. I don't want for wind though. I think that's not a big concern. So.
What's the best place for people looking to play the Sam Houston card tomorrow night? What's the best place to go for info?
SHRP.com. My tip sheet is there with picks and suggested wagers at a $15 budget for each race, which we've had up every night, and that gives everybody kind of a blueprint for what to do on the card. And then obviously tune into the feed. I'll have actually having a guest on Sharpie Time tomorrow night, the preview show. We're going to start at about 4:30 local time, and Nathan Campbell, who's a turf rider that works for Horse Racing US, is going to be on with me. Really nice guy. He's been doing some picks for us during the meet. So looking forward to the last couple of days.
Very cool. And is Jessica still going to be doing her thing for this closing weekend as well?
She will. Yeah, absolutely. You can get her video on the SHRP Twitter. So good reminder. I need to edit her videos for tonight and tomorrow.
Excellent. We aim to please.
Yeah.
Let's talk, Nick, about there's so many things to talk about. Let's talk about Keeneland. There's this all stakes pick 5. I'm really excited about it. I mean, Keeneland, there's a lot of hype around the Keeneland meet. These first couple of cards, they did not disappoint.
They didn't. I laughed at, I tweeted the other day about how great the overnight looked for Saturday. It's just a tremendous race. And, everybody's like, rah, rah, yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, Keeneland, glad to have it back. And one guy goes on and says, just wait a couple of weeks. It's like, what I wanted to reply was, you must be so much fun at cocktail parties, right? It's like,
Definitely
okay,
some serious Debbie Downer vibes there. That's
yeah,
no
that's
two ways
the truth.
about
I
it.
mean, right, you're right. They would, even Debbie Downer would blush at the sight of somebody that has something negative to say about a 15-day boutique meet that's starting off with like 1 million horses in their first 2 cards. But anyway, no, it really, it's great to have Keeneland back, and I'll be doing the expert picks for Keeneland on TwinSpires on the app and on twinspires.com. So very excited about that. And so yeah, it's I mean, it certainly, the overnight races tomorrow are unbelievably good, right? And the stakes are great. So it's just, fingers crossed for some decent weather. Marty McGee's picture of the track this morning was, I thought, a little encouraging. There's not been any real rain yet today. There's definitely been some rain all week, and the forecast is supposed to get worse today and tomorrow, but hopefully we'll at least get a decent surface. And you remember back in the day, and I know I do, not to date either of us whatsoever, but I mean, they used to run at Keeneland on the turf almost regardless of the weather.
Absolutely.
Especially pre-polytrack.
Yeah,
pre-synthetic. I mean, it was, you probably got more non-firm designations on a turf course at Keeneland than maybe the rest of the country combined.
I have no idea why. I mean, I get why it changed during the synthetic era. The logic, I think, was, okay, now they can run on a surface that's similar enough. But it's weird because when they took the synth out and went back to dirt, look, they still stay on more than your average track, but it ain't like it used to be. And I don't really, it's a good Jim Goodman question, actually. I don't know if a safety concern came up or something like that, but it is different than it once was, but it is still such that I do believe we'll be able to, get plenty of turf racing, even when there's a little cut in the ground.
Yeah, I mean, the stakes are going to be on the turf almost certainly. And I was there last October when, I think you were there too, when they ran the Buffalo Trace Franklin County on the turf.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, it was like a hurricane.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe that they ran it on there. It was like, this is insane. But yeah, I guess maybe it has something to do with safety. Maybe also, knowing that that the Breeders' Cup was coming 2 years ago and again this year, you want to keep the integrity of the course in place as much as possible. But it won't take away from the great dirt racing and the stakes races tomorrow either.
I will do a quick Keeneland ad just to remind folks about this new customer promo that Keeneland Select, our sponsors, have going. New accounts get $100 back after you wager $200 this April. And if you wager $300 in the first 30 days, you can earn another $100 back with the standard sign-up bonus. So it's basically $300 for the Keeneland Spring Meet, $200 back for the new accounts. Use the promo code ITM22 at sign up over at KeenelandSelect.com to take advantage of this great offer. And, I know a lot of us out there have the Keeneland Select accounts, but if you don't and you're in a state where you're eligible, don't miss this opportunity to be handed free money. KeenelandSelect.com, promo code ITM22. Let's pivot, Nick, and talk about this all-stakes pick 5 that starts in race number 5 with the Grade 3 Commonwealth. How do you want to light this candle?
I'll tell you, this is an interesting race for a variety of reasons. One of which is, I mean, it seems like Nashville came back from the dead, right? I mean, he was so awful in those 2 prior races at Oakland this year. Maybe awful is a little harsh about his first start of 2021, but he was brutally bad second time out in the King Cotton. And you kind of felt like Nashville's day had come and gone. And then all of a sudden he relocates to New Orleans and puts forth this unbelievable effort with 6 lengths on the field the entire way. And so now it's like, well, maybe Nashville's back. This is 7 furlongs. He's only gone 7 furlongs once before, and obviously he was never beating Charlatan. He did kind of stop a little bit more abruptly than I would have liked him to in the Malibu back late in 2020. He is so clearly the lone speed in this race. It is basically a question of just how much Luis Saez wants to let him do in the opening half mile, because, I mean, he literally could be 10 in front in this race. And I mean, he actually has that type of speed. So, I guess the funny thing about the pace figures is that he actually didn't run any faster early last time out than he had before. But before is the like the old Nashville, right? So the new Nashville in the King Cotton went roughly the same pace that he did last time out, and he stopped. So it's just such an intriguing question. There's also the element of that he's now off Lasix, and he's never raced without Lasix before, because you can use Lasix at Oaklawn, which makes no sense whatsoever in any kind of stake race. But yeah. So that being said, I think you have to line up to take a chance against him while not allowing yourself to be knocked out of the pick 5 if he wins. So I have to admit, I love cutbacks, and I've been dying for Obezos to cut back. And this is a horse that, based on his first few starts, I felt like really had the look of a one-run sprinter. And I think he's just turned out to be a good horse, and that's why he's done as well as he has going long. I thought he actually ran exceptionally well in the mine shaft last time out. No pace on whatsoever. He closed well to be fourth. 7/8 with a little bit of pace in front of him, even if it might only come from one horse. With Irad getting on, I mean, this is as much of a scenario for me as I could possibly find. I also think that 5-1 is a little ambitious. I know that he's relatively popular being with the ownership group, but I don't quite see him going off that low. I do know his speed figures are very good, so perhaps he will end up, but he and Endorsed were who I wanted to try as the best alternatives. I feel like Prevalence is a little exposed now. Last time was the time to get a relatively decent price. I thought he beat kind of a ho-hum field that day too. I just think those other two alternatives to the favorite are a little bit better.
I'm with you on Endorsed. I think this is a really interesting runner, and the angle for me is also related to pace figures in terms of I liked how close he was last time. Closer to the better pace figures than the previous good efforts, while still running a representative final race. I thought maybe this horse has some very subtle improvement going on here at age 6. And while the trip may or may not work out based on if Nashville decides that he's still a horse or not, I thought he was interesting. An 8-1 on the morning line is probably a pretty good guess for Endorsed. So I want him on some tickets. And I agree with you about your idea of the defensive use on Nashville. When he's so loose, in theory, he should definitely be used. My question with him is, and my reason for not putting him on top and definitely wanting to spend more than half the money again that I play through this race against a horse that's going to be probably odds on, is he just a flat track bully? Is it which is a cricketing term for it? Basically just means like faint hearted. Like when they have anything goes wrong, and they're very quick to pack it in, whether that's being challenged early in a race like the King Cotton, or having to go too fast, like in say a race like the Malibu, and having to face a serious foe in there as well. Anyway, we feel exactly the same about him. Defensive use. I am going to include Prevalence, who's a horse who's obviously had so much hype surrounding him. I could see him getting bet down past the point where I wanted to use him in bets that start with this race. But in picks leading into this, I felt like 5-1 was a fair price on this horse, who at age 4, off that big win, heading in the right direction, third race of the form cycle. And you've absolutely talked me into Obezos as well. We'll find a room to get some 11s on the tickets as well. Let's talk about the Appalachian. We've got the 3-year-old fillies in this grade 2 going 1 mile on the turf in this spot. And Nick, I'll throw it back to you for your thought in this one.
Being as skilled as you are in all things Kentuckiana, proper pronunciation of the Appalachian, of course, where you were probably at some point were corrected after calling it the Appalachian, like I was for quite some time. It took until about 6 years ago. This is I'm intrigued. I really want to see how good Spenderella is, and a horse like this that for Graham Motion, who's obviously a guy whose horses generally take a little bit of time to get to their best, when you start off as impressively as she has in her 2 prior starts, it sends a message that she's a horse with, I think, with a good amount of talent. Now, that being said, and she did all the running last time out, I have nothing negative to say about her performance, but Mischievous Kiss, who finished 3rd, came back, was a big favorite on Saturday, and ran very poorly.
Weird ride to be fair, but it was a bad effort. Yeah.
It was not what was expected. That was a field that she really towered over on paper. And I mean, that was the race where the 100 and something to 1 shot nearly won, lost by a zop. So I'm a little concerned in that respect about Spenderella, but I will say she should get a very favorable trip. It does not look like there's a lot of speed in here. And it looks as if the other, potential front runner is a Shug McGahee horse that's been tracking slow paces in recent starts. The thing that you have to be worried about if you're leaning heavily on Spenderella is Dolce Zell might actually turn out to be pretty good. And this was a situation last time out for Irad and Chad where I bet Spicer, and I thought Spicer was going to win for about the first half mile of the race. And then I saw where Irad was and how he looked on horseback, and I thought, there's no way that horse is losing. Like, he's going to get this horse off cover, and she's going to run on, and that's going to be it. And the only horse that ran on with her was her stablemate. So it was a weaker field, considerably weaker field. It was a slow pace, which I think helped her. I don't generally love second off the layoff Euros. Especially if they ran hard first off the layoff. That was also only 4 weeks ago. But the fact that Chad's bringing her back this quickly, I think, is a really positive sign. And I think she's a horse with a lot of upside as well. So I would use her and Spenderella equally. I didn't really have anybody that I was dying to get on the tickets anywhere else. I just couldn't envision the right kind of trip for any of them. Skims does look a little interesting. But again, this is a quite a bit tougher spot, I think, than the one she exits. She's going to have to take a big step forward.
Looking to lock it up 3-4, basically.
Yeah, just 3-4, right?
Yeah, and I don't have much to add, though I did have a point of discussion for the race, which is Mike Maloney on our Keeneland meet preview broke out a stat that is one of these that is wild enough to give me a little bit of pause. Graham Motion's overall record the last 5 years on the turf at Keeneland, it is not good. Like 7% winners with 109 starters and below average in the money. Look, wow. I'm too much of a form and figures guy and a terrible ROI. I'm so much of a form and figures and race design guy that Spenderella is my pick in here. But I'll tell you what, if she runs subpar, I'm going to start to wonder if there's something to, for whatever reason, him just not doing well at this meet. I mean, and hey, it doesn't even matter don't always need the full narrative if you notice something that is a stat that's going to go forward. I'm guessing, there can be a lot of flukish things that make stats happen. The guy's one of my favorite trainers annually. So anyway, I'm going with Spenderella, but I did want to just at least note that because I have a feeling after picking Spenderella, Mike will listen to the show. And if she does run poorly, he's going to probably text me, I told you so. So I figure at least I can give the credit on the show and let the listeners be forearmed. Does that give you any pause, that stat?
It does, because that Keeneland is a meet that certain trainers really target while others don't. We see what Chad Brown is unleashing over the first few cards, and you realize, Chad uses Florida basically as a training center, and he's still hitting at almost 40% clip for the year, but his horses are really geared for Keeneland. And, Graham is a guy who generally has taken it slow early in the year to kind of ramp up towards the summer as well when turf racing becomes a little bit more prevalent. But that's a little surprising. I remember Graham Motion had a really, really good run at the beginning of racing coming back in 2020. And I think it was in large part because he is very good with layoff returnees. And so I wonder if maybe he fired some of those bullets at Gulfstream. I would almost want to look and see what his Gulfstream and Tampa numbers are to see if maybe that gives you some insight into why he hasn't done as well at Keeneland. Keeneland's also a tough place to win. I mean, there's no denying that. So it's a legit concern. I think it's something now that I will have firmly in the back of my mind.
Yeah, I mean, for me, very few to zero of those runners are as in good form as Spenderella and have the pace advantage that Spenderella has here, which is why I'm still, which is why I'm highlighting this and still making her my pick. But yeah, it's just something, just some interesting little podcast fodder there potentially. And you make a great point about it could be as simple as, what would be great to see is what happens with the speed figures of these motion runners at Keeneland?
Right.
Are they declining, or is it basically what you said? How many races is he in against Chad Brown? Half of them probably. And when his are all going up, you could stay the same and still end up with a gnarly percentage. It could be that as well. Anyway, if any databasers out there want to have some fun and run with the ball on this one, we'll publish it over at inthemoneypodcast.com. Grade 1 action in race number 7. It's the Madison, going 7 furlongs on the dirt. And Nick, because I did this silly thing where I keep having my notes in the wrong place, I'm making you go first again.
No, that's no problem at all. This is a really terrific race. And, a situation where you're going to have Bells the One is probably the third choice at best. And she's done some of her best work at Keeneland, obviously done good work everywhere. But, you bring together a couple of horses that ended 2021 and or began 2022 very impressively. Kimari's highlight in 2021 was winning this race. But let's not kid ourselves. I mean, she beat Estilo Talentoso, and she did beat Bells the One, but Bells the One was also not quite I think what she ended up being as the year went on. This is what I'm gradually getting to is this is a much tougher race for Kimari. And I guess the thought process is that Wesley Ward has entered his Splendid News as a rabbit, perhaps to just inject as much pace as possible into this field, which, yeah, theoretically it should help Kimari. I don't know why it would help Kimari much more than it would help Bell's the One, though. And I don't necessarily know why it would hurt Lady Rocket. I think Lady Rocket is perfectly capable of sitting just a little bit off the pace. She also got involved in a very strong pace last time out in the Gopher Wand, and that contributed a great deal to the really swift final time. It's part of the reason why she got a 107 Beyer Fig. So Lady Rocket is a horse that I know the connections always held out a great deal of hope for, and it looked like she was finally starting to realize that potential last year, especially once they got her away from Oaklawn. And and now you have a horse that really could turn out to be anything, and looks like she could be a grade 1 caliber horse from 7 to 9 furlongs, especially around one turn. So how will it all shake out with them coming together? I'm inclined, based on last year's Madison, to be a little fearful that Bell's the One might end up needing a race. But boy, if she's 4-1 and you're getting sprint speed in front of her, she's very hard not to bet. I'm just going to use all three in the pick 5. I'm not going to get cute. If the winner comes from outside of them, I'll take my lumps. I think Center Isle is a good horse as well. I just think that pace scenario wise, it's going to be tough for her from an inside post. I'm going to take those 3 main players and hope that it's a battle down the stretch.
Will you grade them at all? Or who would you put on top?
I'd probably just I'd A all 3 of them.
Gotcha.
And if I had a top pick, I would make it Bell's the One.
Okay. So we'll call that 5, 3, and 6 for you. I've got the same 3 numbers. I went ahead and went with Lady Rocket. I hope I'm not just being a homer for our friends at 10 Strike Racing and their partners. I just like the way that she's come around in these last 3 runs have just been extraordinary on the clock and on form terms. I think she might be the fastest mare in the race. And I think she's going to get a great trip. As you point out, she's not some need the lead type. She's rated. She even closed earlier in her career. So Wesley can play some team tactics, and I don't think it's necessarily going to hurt the chances of Lady Rocket in the spot. So I was going to make her the A and back up with Bell's the One and Kimari in the grade 1 Madison, which brings us to the grade 2 Shakertown for 3 and up, going 5.5 on the turf. And I'll start this one because I finally found the right place in my notes. And I struggled a lot in this race, Nick, because you've got these 2 clear speeds and 2 best horses on numbers in Golden Pal and Just Might, who might very well just run around the track and give you your 2-speed exacta. But that said, I could make about 4 different long shot cases in here of horses that are interesting. And especially for international listeners who have a chance to bet each way. And you know how that works. So it's basically you take the win odds and you get your percentage of it. But you can find great opportunities in a race where the top of the win market is going to be absolutely dominated by runners like Golden Pal and Just Might, because your number to place like necessarily gets inflated because it's based on the win market, even though it's really its own animal. It's sort of a flawed way that they do things. If you take advantage of it too much with a bookmaker, you will get your account closed down. But hey, there's a lot of people out there who bet enough money that they have the opportunity to do this. Anyway, great each way race and a very interesting race, potentially for a long shot who could even win. Because the other thing that could happen is these 2 could, go hammer and tongs and set this thing up for a closer. Of the 4 potential long shots, I'll put up number 6, the Learjet. Ex-Michael Bell runner, now with Brendan Walsh, gelded before the last start and won, rallying well despite a poor beginning. The race wasn't great on the clock, but it's Kentucky Downs, which is, kind of its own animal. I was just wondering, based on some of the finish that the Learjet has showed in that scenario where they go too fast up front, what I'm hoping will be a very, very big price. Maybe this horse could step up, get into the number. That was my thought, but there's so many interesting ones in here. Where did you land?
Yeah, I mean, I had the same feeling that you did about the pace, which is that, Colby Hernandez is a very good gate jockey, being Louisiana guys generally are. They ride a lot of races where it's pretty pivotal to get out of the gate at various racetracks. And so I imagine Just Might is just going to be attached to Golden Pal in the opening stages. And I mean, that has to quicken this thing up, especially if we're dealing with potentially a little bit of a rain softened course. I'm going to give Gear Jockey one more try. I'm going to do something that I really don't very often, which is give him an excuse for last time when there was no discernible excuse, right? It was, he didn't hear anything afterwards about him bleeding or anything like that. He was just flat. And you kind of knew that he was early. And I think Luis Saez knew as well. And so he didn't beat him up. He just sort of let him get around there. And I don't want to hold Gulfstream turf races against horses. So I'm going to give him one more shot. He's back in Kentucky. He's generally been at his best in Kentucky. So he figures to get a really good pace set up here. And I think Brian Hernandez is so heady. He's going to be a good price. He was my alternative. The Learjet, I agree. I think he's interesting. He did get a very good trip when he won the Franklin Sampson. But again, I mean, he's a horse that you're projecting that he's going to take a step forward off the layoff, especially for a guy like Brendan Walsh. And you're also going to get paid for it. So, I mean, this kind of horse is okay to take at 12-1. I wouldn't want to take him at 4-1, but I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about. So that was kind of where I wanted to go. I'd have to use Golden Pal as an A, unfortunately, because he just makes too much sense. But let me tell you something. He has not looked in the eye early of a rival that's anywhere near as fast as Just Might. And 5.5 at Keeneland is not 5 at Del Mar, where you can just outbreak the field and hold him off because, it's like one of our 870-yard quarter horse races. First one to the turn has such a huge advantage. And I don't think he's going to have that edge tomorrow.
It's an interesting place to take a shot. Another goofy one that I ultimately couldn't commit to, but I'll ask you for your opinion on, is the 7 Cowan, a horse that if you like, again, 20-1 plus, we're just talking about like a bomb to get in there somewhere. But a horse that, if you pick and choose the best bits of form, I thought you could make like a little bit of a case in a collapse if ridden the right way. Now, these are a lot of ifs, but I just thought that horse was worth at least mentioning to put on people's radars if you do want to play the something crazy happens because Golden Pal and might just go way too fast scenario. Do you give him any count at all?
He might be more of a placing chance than anything else, but I mean, it's kind of amazing that looking back at his juvenile turf sprint a couple of years ago, it's still one of his better turf races. And so I wonder, and I don't know if maybe the Alcaz got them off of it. I wonder why they didn't run him on turf for so long. Yeah. And I understand that Steve is so good on dirt, and I think he wanted to really give this horse a totally fair shot. But when they finally moved back to the turf, he ran well 2 starts back. Those fairgrounds turf races on the big days, they always have to be taken with a grain of salt, in my opinion, because they bring the rail down only for that card, and a lot of odd stuff happens. You see some wire jobs, you see some horses, maybe you'll see races where everything is outside. So I don't want to hold it against him. He would be a horse for sure that, if he was 20-25-1, I would certainly try and wedge in underneath Golden Pal, maybe a little bit underneath Gear Jockey. And, if he comes in underneath Gear Jockey and you've got an all spot in second, that's a trifecta that you're going to remember.
All right, good stuff. Let's see. That's going to be a really interesting one. I think it's a fascinating betting race, and I think you're right. The try is a really interesting pool for that.
Oh, yeah.
Tries get super interesting when you can tie them to different pace scenarios and whatnot. That's a great conversation for another podcast. Right now, though, we're going to pivot to our analysis of the Grade 1 Bluegrass back at Grade 1 status, which is cool to see. We're going 1 1/8. Folks who watched the other video or have been listening to the whole podcast have already heard my thoughts on this one. So, Nick, we'll throw it right to you. Who's going to win the Bluegrass?
I've been a Zandon guy from the start, so I'm not abandoning ship. I thought Zandon going into the Remsen that it was almost a ridiculous placement. And I realized in mid-stretch that was probably the last time I was going to question Chad Brown making an ambitious choice with a horse, especially a lightly raced horse. And I thought he took the worst of it in the Risen Star. The bad break, wide trip, much farther off the pace than he had ever been before. I thought he had every reason at the top of the stretch to just pack it in, and he kept on running. That was also at 1 1/8 off the bench. This is a horse now who's gone 1 1/8 twice, which I think is puts in a really significant amount of foundation when we're going to be, we're dealing with these horses being so much more lightly raced than they've ever been before. So I'm on Zandon. I think he's going to get the trip similar to the Remsen, where he's a lot closer. And I keep reminding myself over and over, be very careful with deep closers at Keeneland, because these races tend to go to a horse with tactical speed very, very frequently. I have nothing against Smile Happy. I'm not going to make a big speech against him. I thought his Risen Star was fine. I think he's back where he's most comfortable in Kentucky. And so I'm expecting a solid effort once again. I would use the 3 principles without issue. Zandon, Smile Happy, maybe to a slightly lesser extent, Emmanuel, who I do think had plenty of a tough trip in the Fountain of Youth last time out. And the one horse that I'm going to give one more shot is Commanperformance. And I know his Tampa effort last time out, I'm being generous calling it an effort. He was very flat. He was 1-20. He never got a sniff. Now he's second off the layoff. The fact that Todd is willing to do this, this is a situation where Todd could have easily looked at Vinny Viola and Rapoli and said, hey, let's let him break his maiden and then let's look to the Belmont. But they want to get this horse to the Derby, and I'm sure it's not because either of them have a future bet, right? I'm sure it's because Todd thinks he's deserving. And so one more shot, that's it.
You said everything I wanted to say. Zandon is my top pick. Respect, Smile Happy. I didn't even talk about it in the other video, but I mean, Emmanuel off that trip is almost an automatic include. When I really sat down and did the race, I ultimately left him out on the thought of, I think I want him to show me that he's fast enough. But I thought Commandperformance was the interesting one. I horrified JK, who needed him 420 at 1-20 last time. And but I said, hey, there's some part of me where it's almost an automatic bet when a horse was 1-20 in their last start, and they're going to be 20-1 today. And I'm not quite ready to give up on him, especially for underneath. So I'll have him in there. Got to remember, it's rarely a good idea to hedge with like the second choice that you don't really like in equity terms. It just costs so much, and you bleed out any kind of value you might have on your tickets. But it doesn't really cost you any equity, hardly any, to include a potentially live 20-1 shot that you can make a wise guy case for, as you just did.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's the angle there, is that you're going to get significantly more value. And you alluded to the Bluegrass being a grade 1 again. I did not realize until I looked that the Bluegrass, when it became a grade 2, just produced one grade 1 winner after another. Like, it became an unbelievably strong race. You had Practical Joke in 2017 come back and win the Jerkins. You had Vacoma come back and win the Carter and the Met Mile from the 19 running, Good Magic came back and won the Haskell last year, Essential Quality, Art Collector in 2020. I mean, it just became an unbelievably good race. So glad to see it back as a grade 1.
I think that was probably one of the easier decisions for Rick Hammerly and the rest of the Graded Stakes committee when they met. I don't know if you ever got a chance to hear that show, but that was super fun. We had Rick on a quiet show over the winter, just like explaining the process and like the whole point of the Graded Stakes committee. It was actually really
I completely missed that. Yeah, no, I need to listen to it. We're certainly pulling for the Houston Ladies Classic to get an upgrade in the future. Hopefully Pauline's Pearl goes on to do some of the things Latruska and Forever Unbridled Midnight Bisou has done.
Well, Hammer, you got his phone number. I'm sure you could start lobbying now. I'm sure he'd love that.
Yeah, I think he would. I think he'd love for a race to get upgraded during a series of races at Oaklawn that are in the same division. So
good stuff, Nick. Well, this is always a pleasure. We'll look for you everywhere we can find you, including in themoneypodcast.com, where you do such a great job covering NYRA for us. And yeah, we'll be talking soon.
Sounds great, my friend. Good luck this weekend.